What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast No Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about one of the best things, honestly, I've heard in the gaming industry in a while. And I don't necessarily know how to title this, don't really know how to express it, but this actually was Krafton's CEO, and he was talking about Hi-Fi Rush, talking about Tango, and, there was some highlights that I saw on Twitter, some, key phrases that the guy said, and they all spoke to me. They all were honestly really, really good. We're going to talk about it. I actually clicked on the article and started reading the article, and I feel like it was even better. This is a guy who only really wants to break even, and now, look, words are just words. You got to, back it up with action, and I think hopefully Krafton can actually implement this plan and, do these type of things in the future. You look at something like Callisto Protocol. Obviously, that didn't go the way I think people necessarily hoped it would, but he's saying all the right things, and I think it's just refreshing. I think it's refreshing to hear people talk about kind of like the art and the ability to express and creativity versus the money. And because most of the time you only hear about, oh, well, it's risky to do this game. It's risky to do that. This time it's actually the opposite, which I really love to hear. So let's kind of go over the highlights that I found in the article. So firstly, just the title here, and this comes from GameDeveloper.com. We don't think Hi-Fi Rush 2 is going to make us money. Krafton CEO says Tango Gameworks acquisition is about legacy. So right there, that's immediately a good sign in terms of something that, again, kind of speaks to me. And so you kind of go through some of the bigger things that he said. We wanted to maintain their legacy. Although they did not have a big success in their game, we saw many creatives worth pursuing. That's why we wanted to work with them. Because Hi-Fi Rush fans really want to see sequels, we negotiated with Tango's parent company to acquire that IP as well. According to Kim, the sudden shutdown of Tango Gameworks left employees anxious, which is pushing Krafton to complete the deal as soon as possible. We wanted to make sure the deal happened fast to minimize that gap in their career. Given Krafton felt the move was time sensitive, the company focused on pursuing Hi-Fi Rush franchise as opposed to all of their IPs, which included Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo. If we were to acquire all IPs, I think it's going to complicate the deal too much. Krafton is a pretty big company, but Microsoft is very complicated. We wanted to help the team continue developing their games, but especially Hi-Fi Rush. When I think about our fans, I think what they really care about is Hi-Fi Rush sequels. The acquisition is still being finalized, preventing Kim from disclosing how much Krafton has spent on the Japanese studio. He did, however, describe the purchase as not too expensive or too cheap either. We really cannot translate the volume into money. It's more about the significance, he adds. The dollar amount was really not important to Microsoft. That's pretty interesting, too. Then he talks about the studio size. He says, I think a minimum of 100 people is what we're aiming for. Scale it around that size. He says maybe it'll go higher, maybe it'll go lower. Then he gets, I think, even more interesting. We're trying to increase our portfolio lineup, and Tango Gameworks comes into play there. He says, knowing that many of Tango's previous games may not even have broken even. We can't acquire Tango Gameworks based on their financials or their numbers, right? We don't think Hi-Fi Rush 2 is going to make us money, to be frank, but it's part of our attempt. We have to keep trying to develop games in the spirit of challenge taking. Tango Gameworks are creative. They want to try something new, and we want to do more of that. Making video games is really a hit or miss industry, and that is risk taking, but having more project lineups is actually a way to mitigate risk because one of them might work out. I freaking love that. When pressed on whether Hi-Fi Rush was a commercial success for Microsoft, he says he doesn't exactly know how much the game earned, but when considering production costs, he feels it might not have delivered a substantial return. Did it add a lot of money to Microsoft? That might not be the case. I'm not saying I know how much they made. That's just my guess. But the IP itself was very fresh and featured new types of gameplay. I know it's not a game a lot of studios were making, and we have to keep trying that approach. Kim suggests corporations like Krafton shouldn't aspire to deliver an infinite procession of chart-topping hits, largely because that's wildly unrealistic. Instead, he feels the goal should be to break even while nurturing creativity. That's the best line, I think, in the whole thing. Just recoup the production costs, please, is what I say. But that in itself is a pretty big challenge. If you try doing that, you might actually land a big hit. I don't trust people who say, oh, this is going to be a hit. I want someone who can try something new. The big hit shouldn't be your goal. If you think about it that way, Hi-Fi Rush might have brought in a little bit of minus in terms of financials, but it's a team that should be encouraged to create something new and continue their journey. We want to have more teams like that under our umbrella. I mean, oh my God, honestly, perfect. Truly, like, now, again, like, you got to have to back it up. But, I mean, like, he kind of did back it up. Like, they bought Tango Gameworks, and they're making Hi-Fi Rush 2. And based off him, like, look, I think he's taking the polite way out of it. I think he is, maybe he's even, like, contractually obligated to not say things. But I have a feeling, based off what he said, Hi-Fi Rush did not break even. It actually lost money, okay? That's what my guess would be based off what he said. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The game was a critical darling. It was kind of like a cult hit. People probably played a lot of it on Game Pass. But I think the amount of copies it sold was really low. And, if you're looking at that in terms of, the production costs and all that, it probably lost money, right? So, but I mean, like, towards the end of that, holy God, right? Nurturing creativity, having people try something new, breaking even, just break even, right? And it's like, man, now, I can understand why not everybody can do that, right? You go to an Xbox, you go to a PlayStation, and you make The Last of Us Part 3. You're not in it to break even. And I would argue, though, based off, like, the creativity angle that he was talking about, does that hurt things? It might actually hurt things, right? Because you're almost going to try to limit things, right? Like, and let's just use The Last of Us Part 3, or pick anything, like even Gears of War, right? Gears of War E-Day. These are games that are in it to make a boatload of money. These are not games to break even. But even in that, when they're making the games, there might be things that they kind of hold off on or hold back on because maybe they deem it too risky. This kind of mentality seems like just go for it. Do what you want to do. Try different things. And even if it doesn't necessarily work, we want you to try again. We want you to keep making creative things going forward. Like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, when do you hear that at all? I've never... For as long as I've done these news videos, which honestly I've been pretty consistent for like 4 or 5 years at this point, I don't think I've ever heard that. Like, I don't know, you'll hear Phil Spencer sometimes talk about creativity or Herman Hulst or whatever, but never like this. Never like this. And most times it's like pundits or, like industry experts that talk about the risk, that talk about you can't make certain games anymore, right? And it's not like, I'm not saying they're wrong. They're actually right. You hear so many industry analysts over the last 2, 3, 4 years, and there's been quotes where they're saying things like, yeah, making a game like this just can't happen anymore. It's too risky. Companies don't want to do it. That's true. So to hear the exact opposite, no, we have to go after that. We have to go after teams that are willing to make that, and then we have to double down on it. Now, you need money. You need to break even. You also need to make money. But, I kind of like this mentality of like, well, if you just have a bunch of games, and if they're all aiming to break even, right, like that has to be like your bottom goal, right? But if you have like 12 games coming out, if you have a couple of them like break through, isn't that what we talk about with live service? Live service, you make 10 live service games. You hope to make tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. You just made up for all those failures. Honestly, you look at, like, again, use PlayStation. Helldivers makes up for Concord. Not necessarily in the studio. Like, Firewalk is probably in some deep trouble right now, but, and Helldivers, obviously doing really well. But, like, the money that Helldivers brought in is easily enough money to offset. You know what I mean? Now, again, like that, it's a bigger company, and you got to watch out, way more if you're PlayStation probably than if you're Crafton. But that general idea is the same, right? Make 5 live service games. If one hits, you probably can be okay with those 4 failures. You can probably get away with it. You can probably not go bankrupt or, any of these type of things. It could be similar with these AAA, or a AA even, like, single-player games. If you come out with 5 or 6 of them, if they're all trying to break even and maybe one doesn't, right? So you have 5 games. One doesn't break even. Let's say 3 do, okay? So now you're kind of like you're slightly below, but then one explodes. One of them, you wanted to sell 2 million, it sells 6 million. Well, that makes up not just for that one failure, but the other 3 that broke even. Now they all technically, in terms of company, you made money. You know what I mean? So it is possible. And I love to, man, honestly, like I love to see those quotes. And, I saw some of like the bigger ones of like, they don't expect Hi-Fi Rush to make them money. And it's like, man, that's a bold thing to say. And it's also like, I give a lot of respect to that. So you see that headline, but then you see some of the like direct quotes that this guy was saying towards the end of it. I love it. Foster creativity, please, for the love of God. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.